I am Jill Christian, I'm chairman.
I'm Lee Dixon and I'm vice chairman.
So guys, we're sort of here to discuss the plans for next season, and you've had some quite frank discussions amongst the club and with Jonesy looking ahead. And the long short of it is Jonesy staying on as manager for into next season.
Yeah, that's right. We, as a board, we met with Paul this week, had a really helpful discussion. We obviously shared our disappointment with him in terms of the league position, and he obviously is also disappointed, but we've talked about his plans for the future and we're confident that he can turn that around. So, you know, the board's decision was that we've got every confidence that we need to stick with Paul, and that, you know, for the club and the players, that stability is the way forward, and we've got every confidence he'll do that next season.
I think it was important. I had a couple of long conversations with Paul prior to the board, us meeting and getting the information we needed to bring back to the board, so we were all prepared when we met. But I think the main thing for me that came out of it was, albeit we're not happy, the fans aren't happy where we are in the league, Paul and the players aren't happy. Let's remember that. It's been a tough season. At Christmas, we were right where we wanted to be. We were in the playoffs and everything was heading in the right direction. And for many reasons that are outside of everybody's control, through lack of availability, injuries, the amount of travel we have to commit to, we just feel that like we're not a million miles away, and maybe with a little bit more luck at the right times of the season, we could be in a very different position. That said, I think the open and frank discussions we've had is, I think Paul recognises that maybe we have to tweak our style of play slightly. I think there'll be a natural progression with that, with things that are coming up in the summer and players that will be available next year and players that won't be. And so hopefully going forward, we'll see a little bit more of a dynamic style of play, with albeit a little bit of the stability that Paul's brought to the table since he's been running the team with his coaching staff. So all in all, we weren't overly happy. Paul's not overly happy. I'm sure the fans aren't overly happy, but we just feel that we need to go into next season with something nice and bright and fresh, and positive outlook on it, and let's see, can we kick on and go to that next level? It's going to get us up into where we want to be in the playoffs.
You said about stability being a key thing of that. How much of that was the decision, not only with yourselves and Jones, but also with the players, about keeping that sort of the continuity of that around them?
I think it was unanimous from the players. I obviously, as I have to in my role as director of football, I spoke to a lot of the players to get feedback from them, and it was unanimous from the players' side that they want Paul in charge. And obviously that has to be a factor in driving our decision, because ultimately they're the ones who go in the changing room, they're the ones who train and travel with the team. They all wanted Paul to stay on, to give him a chance to change around what they feel they've maybe not done so well this year as a group in terms of the players. And I know from quite a lot of them, they feel like they've let them down a little bit this season.
You said about things that are beyond our control. Part of that is the travelling, and how, I suppose, how confident are you that we can next season continue with what is still going to be an extensive travel list, but crack on for where we want to be?
I think from someone who's done it, obviously for the first 18 months, you cannot underestimate how hard it is. I know we've got fans that travel and what they do is incredible, and I admire them so much for it, but it is so tiring and so draining out of your life. Not just the period of time you're away, it's the recovery when you get back, it's the preparation before you go. And I think it's important to point out that we're ultimately sort of 4 years into this journey, and we're still learning and evolving, and we're still trying to come to terms with that travel. I think the players, the likes of Steve, Jack, Al Maitland, the ones who've been in it from the outset, who've done probably 90% of them games, they're not used to it yet. I still speak to them about how much it takes out of them, so they're not used to it. We have teams come here, and I think it's common knowledge, they complain and whinge about everything when they come here because they've been up at 5 o'clock in the morning. We're doing that 23 times a year, you know, and like, they're the factors I think that we're still coming to terms with. And as a board, it's something that we've spoke about in the past 2 weeks, that, you know, we've got to look at all these factors that are outside of our control, and we've got to give some leeway for that, I think. And I think when we put it all into the melting pot, Jill, I think we were sort of all looking at it from the perspective of how difficult it is. And actually, it's important that we give Paul a little bit more time to try and see, can we slightly turn the direction we're going in? And that might be the little turn we need that takes us to where we need to go.
I think, as Lee said, it's no normal club, is it? The travel and the commitment on the players and the strain, and the fact that we're in a limited pool of players as well. It's not just, it's no normal football club. So I think we've got to be patient with the manager and the players to help them to get it right.
Well, yeah, I mean, so I think there's one group the other week from one of these fan groups that keeps figures in the UK saying that we've used the second lowest amount of players across the North West Counties leagues.
Yeah,
And we've got the biggest challenges.
And yet, you know, Paul, when we met with him, you know, he said at the start of the season he had anticipated using an even smaller pool of players, but because of injuries and player commitment issues, obviously he's had to use more than he'd anticipated. So even, you know, as you said, even still, we've still used the least players, but we've used more than we thought. You know, if you had your ideal 15 available week in, week out, then it'd be brilliant. But because of our situation, that's not possible.
I think to put things into a bit of perspective, I had a conversation with Gary, the manager of Lower Breck, 2 or 3 weeks ago when he was over. And up till October, they weren't doing fantastically well. And I think they were somewhere around where we were, just below, just outside the playoffs, or just teetering on the playoffs. They went out and signed 3 players from higher leagues and brought them in. And he said he can't believe the transformation they've had since then. Now, when we played them 2 or 3 weeks ago, when I was speaking to him, they'd won 21 out of 22 games at that point. Since then, players come in. We don't get the opportunity to do that. We can't go out and just sign players. We can't go out and bring them in. Paul loses his centre forward, or he loses his winger or his fullback. He can't just go out and replenish that with someone that's coming from higher up than where we are already. Ultimately, he's dipping into the squad of players, which is great. Or he's going back into local football to potentially bring lads in like he has at times this year, who maybe haven't even trained with us very much. So, you know, when we talk about the challenges we have, let's put them into a bit of perspective here. That's what we're dealing with. And so when people think, yeah, we should be there and we have our expectations of where we want to be, do we really know where our expectations should be yet after 4 years? And dealing with all these problems and how hamstrung we are compared to everybody else in the league that can replenish and bring players in and freshen up. And so I think all that said and done, I think we've got to be balanced in our view about it.
Say about with ambition, what have you set where you want to be next season?
I don't think we've had that conversation yet. I think
it takes care of itself, really, doesn't it? In terms of our ambitions, would be similar to last season. I think. Jill,
I think so. I think as Lee said, I think if we're honest, we've been overly optimistic. I think we've expected far too much. You know, even from the first season, I think the first season just was a dream season, wasn't it? And then we thought we'd continue that, but actually we're in a harder league. We've got more games, and the toll that takes and the knock-on effect. I think we've really overestimated how well we can do, and I think we've had a bit of a reality check. That's not to say we don't want to do better. Of course we do, and we should be doing better, and we're capable of doing better. But I think the next thing, now that we've made the decision that we're sticking with Paul, obviously Lee will go away and have a chat with him, and then we'll set our expectations before the start of the season.